Hey, White Sox fans! Brett Ballantini here, lucky enough to host edition number 2 of Dugout Metrics. You might remember about a month ago, we debuted our latest podcast with two of our more sabermetric inclined guys who also happen to be recent and current baseball players at the college level. We thought that was a nice combination to sort of give you some insight that you might not get from some of our other podcasts. So let me welcome in for the second time. Yes, this is edition number 2. It's Luke Smailes and Trevor Lyons. Guys, thanks for joining again. I think we got some news to talk about.
Yeah,
we
thank you,
do.
Brett.
Liam Hendriks. We finally got a move to talk about after a month, so that's always good.
Big commitment to Liam Hendriks, and we sort of knew this was coming. The site itself and James Fox had anticipated this move a week ago, thinking it was going to be happening last week. Apparently, the deal got shopped around a little bit more, so the White Sox ended up having pony up a little bit money, including a really sort of bizarre fourth year. If Liam is absolutely toast in 2024, he gets very strange, like, was it $1.5 million a year for 10 years, something crazy like that. But let's just hop off right here because you guys are going to have insight that perhaps we're not going to get in many other spots. You're not going to hear on many other podcasts. Really, it seems dumb. Even a dumb guy like me can say, hey, he's got a lot of saves. You know, he's aces. He's tough. He says all the right things. What makes Liam Hendriks so good?
Hendriks, there's a lot that makes him good. Obviously, the thing that jumps off the page to you is his fastball, how good his fastball is. It gets almost 20 inches of induced vertical break, which is really crazy, actually. There's only 6 pitchers that were better in 2020 in Major League Baseball than Liam Hendriks was an induced vertical break. And that was James Karinchak, Tristan McKenzie, Wes Benjamin, who's a reliever for the Rangers, Cam Bedrosian with the Angels, and then Trevor Bauer. And then from that group I just named, only Bauer got more horizontal break than Hendriks. Hendriks gets 8.1 inches of horizontal break, and Bauer was at 9.1. Another interesting tidbit, he gets 7 feet of extension off the mound, which is pretty crazy. So that's like right on top of you. So he's listed at 6 feet, but he's coming 7 feet farther at you off the mound, which creates an advantage as well. And then,
you guys,
he had a 17.6.
You guys as hitters, you guys don't like seeing that kind of extension? You don't like the guy tickling your chin as he's releasing the ball?
Well, no, because then, he's at 60 feet, 6 inches, he's coming at you, more at like, 53 feet. So it adds an element of deception as well. So definitely, yeah.
For like your old school baseball guys, before they had all the ways to quantify it, it would be a guy that you come back to the dugout and say, wow, his fastball really jumps on you. It really gets on you. And that's one of the reasons why, is because of that extension that he gets. It makes 95, 96 maybe feel like 100.
Yeah, that perceived velocity is a lot higher.
And he's a guy who, up until recently, part of the reason why we can calm people's fears about giving so much money, the guy at this age, and if you look at his career stats, they can be frightening. Well, this is a guy who still has a relatively fresh arm. He's sort of just recently come into this role. Either of you guys give me some insight as to really what's changed with him to make him really the elite closer in the game?
Yeah, I would say, obviously he just relatively recently became a true closer, a true guy that got the 9th inning. And when you're talking about someone that, you may have heard some of the interviews with him, he has that competitive edge that he brings to the table. He wants the ball in the 9th inning, and he wants to prove that he's better than every hitter he faces. So when we're not looking at the analytics side of it, it's a little bit tough to quantify that. But that's something that edge is something that a lot of closers need. So getting into that closer role, some of the work that he's done with Codify, something that Lucas Giolito and Yasmani Grandal use as well with some of the heat maps, understanding what he should be throwing to hitters in certain situations, certain counts, and where he should be throwing those pitches. Ever since he underwent that change, that's something that has seemed to really propel him into the dominance that he's shown over the past few years. And with that great plus stuff that Luke was mentioning, he also has great control. He, over the past 2 years, his walks per 9 innings were 2.22, and then last year 1 walk per 9 inning. So out of a closer, he's not someone that's going to put a lot of guys on base, which is kind of something that with Alex Colomé, it almost seemed like he was dancing out of trouble every time he went out there. And with Liam Hendriks, he's more of that prototypical dominant guy. He's not going to give up free passes. He's going to get a lot of strikeouts. And it's more of a sustainable solution to the pen. Although Alex Colomé, you can't say enough about what he's done over the past couple of years for the Sox.
That sort of leads into what I was going to ask next. You touched on it a little bit there, Trevor, but there's obviously a contingent of fans. I don't think too vocal, because I think generally people are pretty thrilled by the fact that Liam Hendriks is going to be the closer for the White Sox. And we've heard a lot about how Colomé's peripherals, it's a ticking time bomb and so forth. But Colomé was a guy who was going to come back. He knows the team's familiar with him. He was going to come back cheaper. He's certainly going to come cheaper and with shorter contract commitment. So, all right, the question is, why not just stick with Alex Colomé as your closer?
I think Hendriks gives you that advantage of, MLB Network just released that they had him as the top closer in baseball. And I think, he's definitely top 5, and you could definitely make that argument like they did that he's the number 1 closer right now in baseball. Just based on some of those, physical stats I was telling you about, the guy's just nasty. I mean, Colomé, to his credit, he did what he was brought in to do. He converted saves for a couple years, and like Trevor said, he did make it interesting at times, and maybe we won't get that same, couple base runners on in the 9th every time as we kind of saw from Colomé. But I think the word with Colomé is that some people could not understand how he kept starving off the expected regression that he was going to do. And I think Hendriks is just the I don't want to say safer bet, but it's the guy you go out and get, because you're able to do that based on the fact that you have already a good bullpen built up. You have Bummer, you have Marshall, you have Hoyer, you have Foster, all signed cheaply. So you can kind of go get the cherry on top with a guy like Liam Hendriks. But somebody, now that that Hendriks is off the table, somebody's going to pay Colomé for probably a multi-year deal and give him a decent chunk of money here.
Would there be room for him in this White Sox bullpen if this dead market continues dead? I know Colomé obviously wants to be a closer. There is a need from other teams, but let's say people see those, see some of the numbers, and they can't figure it out either. And maybe his market does drop, or he's not going to say he's getting $7 million offered to be a closer somewhere else. Does he take 5 and come back with the Sox? Is there room for him, or do we just have too many young arms and he has to be squeezed out?
Yeah, I highly doubt that the Sox would make that commitment to Alex Colomé and bring him back. Based off of his 2019, some of his advanced stats and some of his pitch metrics, it seemed like he was primed for a regression in 2020. And he actually took a step forward when it comes to some of those metrics and some of that advanced stat type thing, which makes you think that it could be more sustainable now. Maybe not to the level that he was converting saves at in the last 2 years, but he's definitely a solid bullpen arm. And he's going to go somewhere and I would think, should remain as a closer. And I think he can perform relatively well, but he doesn't necessarily have that certainty that you may be getting. Not to say that any bullpen arm is a certainty, but Liam Hendriks is about as safe of a bet as it can get for at least the next year or two. And when it comes down to some of the money that the White Sox spent, it didn't look like they were going to make a huge splash anywhere else. Obviously, playing at the top of the market for a relief pitcher is a little bit different and may not take quite as much commitment and quite as much money. And they gave him a pretty penny. But I think that over the next few years, I mean, what do you have to lose? It's not like they're up against some sort of a salary cap. It's just money. So
let's hit on that.
Yeah,
I want to hear. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I had to bet too with Colomé, I'd bet that the Sox will be facing him a lot this next year, because my prediction here on the podcast is that he'll be a Minnesota Twin now that the Sox signed Hendriks. I think the Twins are going to go hard after Colomé because they need a closer. They've been talking a lot about Brad Hand, and there's been rumors about the Sox maybe trying to pillage Nelson Cruz, but I think the Twins pivot here and now they go after Colomé.
I've seen some sass from Minnesota about this, this overpay, whatever, for Hendriks. And so I believe me, that did sort of kick into my head. I'm glad that you're putting that down as a prediction because I wasn't going to say it. But if that flop happens, boy, I'm going to sit back. It might be some popcorn time for that. But okay, let's get I want both of your opinions on this, sort of going off of what was just said in terms of the value and the money laid out. How much prime Hendriks do we need to get? Meaning this 2019, 2020 run he's been on and what the White Sox are paying for. How many seasons of that do we need? And forget World Series. Obviously, the White Sox win a World Series. It's all worth it. Doesn't matter. White Sox don't win a World Series. How many prime seasons of Hendriks do we need out of this 4-year contract for us to feel like, all right, I'm happy with this deal and what was shelled out? Is it just a single season? Is it a couple? Is it 3?
Yeah, I would think that I'd want Hendriks at least for the next 2 years to be that top end elite closer. And then in that 3rd year, probably, still an above average closer is what I would hope for. I know that the 4th year kind of gives them some flexibility if they want to kind of kick out that, that 10-year payout if they want to do that. But maybe that's a signal that, hey, they told Hendriks, we're going to use you a lot. And if your arm's blown out by then so be it. But, these next 3 years, you're going to be used a ton. Upwards of 100 innings or, what it may be. But I think at least 2 years, we need an elite closer out of Hendriks for given what we're paying him.
Trevor?
Yeah, I would reiterate that. I think that, he's, 32 years old. He should be, with the way that a lot of pitchers are aging these days, especially once they make that transition over to the bullpen, it seems like he should still have 2, 3, maybe if we're lucky, even 4 good years in him. And so I don't think that's too much to ask, especially with the amount of money that they shelled out to pay him.
One of you guys already referred to the fact that he's got this. He's got a vocal approach. He's got a lot of attitude on the mound, and that's somewhat traditional with closers. Colomé didn't necessarily have that, but you see that more often than not. Both as a fan, as a student of the game, but even particularly as a player, is there something to like the closer mystique? Is there something to that bravado? Does that amp you up at all, or can that be too much and become a distraction? What's your feeling there? Because as you just pointed out, he may be counted on for major innings, which is maybe another thing that could really give heart to the team. Where it's like, hey, we know if we need him, we got him for 2 innings.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said about that. I think as a closer and a guy, when you're playing behind your closer, you want a guy that you feel is super confident in the high leverage moments is going to go out and take the ball. And, maybe if he does have, some butterflies in a certain situation, high leverage situation, he's kind of combating that own emotion within himself by getting really fired up and kind of showing that other outward emotion as a closer. But I think, as it relates to Hendriks, I think maybe what the Sox like too is because he's so, kind of vocal, energetic, and he's ready to take that moment. I would also like to see them maybe experiment in his role a little bit and kind of take after how the Rays handled Nick Anderson this past year. I think figuring out the best way to deploy Liam Hendriks in the highest leverage situation, whether that be the 7th, 8th, 9th inning, whether it be the 5th inning when, bases are loaded and 1 out or whatever it may be. You have a lot of other really good bullpen arms. I thought Aaron Bummer might be the closer this year, so you could definitely deploy him in the 9th inning. People think Hoyer's a future closer, Crochet. So I think they might experiment a little bit with Hendriks' role.
Yeah, as far as what you were talking about with that mentality of a closer, or really as a pitcher in general, depending on, you'll get some guys, I think it's a lot personality based, like you mentioned with Colomé. Some of those guys will show the emotion outwardly, and other guys are more internally focused and mild-mannered. But like Luke mentioned, what you really want in a pitcher in general is that internal confidence that they think they are the best pitcher on the face of the planet. is what you hope. You know, I played with guys that, one guy in particular, I'll mention him if he's watching this. Hunter, don't get too mad at me, but he had very average stuff, but he truly believed that he was the best pitcher on the face of the planet when he took the ball. He was my roommate, and he would tell me, when I go up there, you know, I feel like I can throw it right down the middle and they're not going to be able to touch me. And he used that to a very, very stellar career as a starting pitcher at Bellarmine. So that internal confidence, I think, is the most important part. And you can just tell from some of the interviews that I've watched that Liam Hendriks has that for sure. And he wants to prove that the deal, you know, was a bargain. So hopefully he brings that fire and that energy. As far as where he ends up, if I had a guess, you know, with the way that the White Sox have always done things, and with Tony La Russa, although he has been known to embrace the analytics for his time, I would think they'll just stick him in the 9th inning and let him do his thing.
All right, we are going to continue this closer discussion. We're also going to get into other aspects of the offseason, given that this is probably the biggest splash move, as evidenced by, I believe, 13 podcasts on South Side Sox this week having to do with Liam Hendriks, including this one. We're going to take a quick break and get back with the second half of Dugout Metrics here in just a second. And if you're watching the video, just close your eyes for a sec. Okay, we are back. It is Dugout Metrics 2. I'm here with Luke Smailes and Trevor Lyons, and we're talking mostly Liam Hendriks, given that that is the big splashy free agent signing, most likely of the offseason for the Chicago White Sox. But let's just ease up just a couple steps from specifically Liam Hendriks. I want to get a little philosophical with you guys. And it gets into a little bit of that closer mystique again. Liam Hendriks, in a great 2019 season, I believe 3.5 Baseball Reference WAR, which is ludicrous, obviously, for a reliever. So top of his game, still throws 5% of the pitches that Oakland threw that year. Closer-wise, do we make too much of a closer? I mean, we just spoke before the break about how it's important to have this guy with bravado, a guy that you can hand the ball to, and this game is over. But maybe extending a little bit from what Luke was talking about, where this guy can be deployed, a guy like Liam Hendriks can be deployed earlier in a game, and it doesn't have to be a 9th inning guy. Do we make too much of closers, especially in light of the fact that we're paying Liam Hendriks an awful lot of money to probably take about 5% or so of the pitches during the course of each season in his contract?
Yeah, I think I think the closer role is overblown. I think the whole 9th inning guy that you have to bring in when you're up by 3 or less, I think that's a little bit overblown. I don't think the importance of a good bullpen and the Sox potentially having an elite bullpen when it comes playoff time, I don't think that's overblown. I think maybe what pushed this kind of signing over the edge was what they saw firsthand when they saw kind of how the A's were able to use Hendriks on back-to-back days. I know the first day he wasn't as effective, but being able to throw him multiple innings, 50-plus pitches, I think Hendriks might be a little bit of a different cat that way. I think he's just, I think, by far and away the best reliever available. And like we said before, he might be the best one in the game right now. But I don't think, I think, especially given the other relievers that the Sox have, I think they were just able to make this move. And like I said before with the roles, I think the other guys that they have slated in that bullpen, I think gives them the flexibility should they want to do it to kind of mix and match their usage of Hendriks. And I hope they do it.
Trevor, no offense to Hunter. Hey, Hunter. Is the closer role as important as we make it out to be? Because we really do, as fans, generally speaking, make it out to be really important.
Yeah, I think that it's fun to make the closer a mystique almost. And it's kind of something that has lived throughout baseball history. Well, not really, actually. Back in the day, guys were going the whole game. But in recent baseball history, that guy that has that mystique around him, the fireman that's going to come in and the game's over. But like Luke was saying, it is a little bit of a luxury. I personally, if I was Rick Hahn, I don't necessarily know what his budget was, what Jerry is allowing him to work with. So I can't make too many calls on that. But I would have preferred to spend big money elsewhere rather than that bullpen arm, just because, like I mentioned, typically they're so volatile from year to year, and you don't necessarily know exactly what you're going to get. So, I would have preferred maybe the money be spent in right field prior to the Adam Eaton signing, or starting pitcher, a top end starting pitcher, something like that. Or, maybe even splurge on a DH, which I don't necessarily know if would fit into the long-term plans unless you get a guy on a 1-year deal like a Nelson Cruz. But that's kind of where I would have gone with it. But, I can't complain about Jerry spending money. So I'll take it for sure. Getting that lockdown bullpen arm is better than not having it. So I'm happy with it.
That's comforting to hear, even from the sort of the metric side and the player side of things, of, hey, of course we want to put a finer point on all the spending, because Lord knows it's somehow limited for the Chicago White Sox playing in Chicago. But, the truth is you're spending the money, and, we're going to get to in just a second whether this maybe is a signal that perhaps there might be surprisingly more to come. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's just address, before we leave the topic behind entirely, of Liam and how he'll be used, does the fact that he is a different kind of cat, like Luke said, does he maybe force – Tony La Russa has been innovative, but let's face it, Tony La Russa is a much older manager. He does have a young pitching coach alongside him, and so hopefully that will help with sort of the overall innovation of the handling of the pitching staff. But it's the fact that he's a guy who can throw 50 pitches, the guy who's very different and has attitude, says he's not going to refuse the ball. Can he help maybe that in cahoots with a younger pitching coach? Could Hendriks help force a little bit of a changed attitude? I mean, we can all assume Tony's just going to want to hand it to Liam Hendriks for the 9th inning, right? But could he maybe force some innovation based on just the weapon that he is?
Yeah, I think so. And I think maybe, as you mentioned, I think Ethan Katz might have a role in that as well, saying, hey, Tony, we have Cody Hoyer, we have Garrett Crochet, we have Aaron Bummer. We can give the ball to all those guys in the 9th inning. If we have the top of the order coming up in the top of the 7th, and we want to make sure we get through it. We're protecting a 1-run lead right now, especially with our offense. We think they can get us a couple more runs. Why don't we bring in Hendriks right now and make sure we get through that top of the order unscathed. And I think with Hendriks too, I think he's done that before. He's been an opener before with Oakland. Oakland's obviously a very innovative organization, and he's been thrown in a couple of different roles, and it seems like he kind of took to that as well. So obviously that's something you want to be vocal with him and say, hey, are you comfortable coming in different situations? I know some guys are, some guys aren't, but again, I think it's in their best interest to kind of figure out a model to bring him in the highest leverage situations given the game situation, because that's ultimately what we're paying him to do is get the biggest outs of the game. And those aren't necessarily in the 9th inning.
This would be the craziest thing if, after all our belly aching, and a very legitimate belly aching over hiring Tony La Russa, it would be quite a prank if it turns out that, like, somehow the White Sox become like this Tampa Bay Rays innovative team with the use of their.
That he's really been studying the past couple of years.
It's not impossible. He's obviously a very bright guy. Between the lines, a very bright guy. And that would be a nice little a cherry on the sundae if it turned out that way. And again, hopefully having a workhorse, have a guy who's efficient as Hendriks has been, with still a relatively fresh arm, it would be really great if he could force just even, we don't need full innovation, maybe not the 5th inning, but at least some partial innovation would be really cool and refreshing to see from the White Sox, because I don't know if we've ever seen it. I mean, in my lifetime as a fan, you guys, I can speak for you, I don't really think we've seen it. That would be a cool offshoot, given all of the nightmare and headache of the later 2020 White Sox fandom was. Hey, let's hop a little bit to what might remain in the offseason. We can assume there's not a lot of money to spend. and there's not really a lot of frontline talent on the market. George Springer might be the only one. Nelson Cruz, I guess you could sort of squeeze into that at DH, a guy with a shorter term. In terms of long-term big money contract, Springer might be the only one. We see any chance of the White Sox signaling with this Hendriks deal, which was more than they wanted to spend and more years than they wanted to give, of a little bit more of an all-in type of move where we might be a little surprised by what is still to come, or is it just going to be tinkering and a couple minor moves from here?
You know, I don't necessarily know what you would consider a minor move. I don't think we're going to see anything at the top of the market, but I definitely think they're going to add another bat. They're going to add another starting pitcher and potentially add a backup catcher. I think that that's less likely than the other two, but I could see them doing any of those things. One guy that I would be interested in just for his versatility, and I think could take some at bats at DH as well and fits in pretty well with what the White Sox in general need, is Tommy La Stella, another former Oakland A. He can play second base. He can play third base. We know Yohan Moncada has dealt with injuries. We know Nick Madrigal has dealt with injuries. And so keeping those guys fresh, as well as taking some of those DH at bats, he's a guy that brings a high on base percentage and has shown a little bit of pop as well. A left-handed bat. He's going to work his walks. He's not going to strike out as much, which are two things that the White Sox offense, although potent, tend to struggle with. So I think he's a guy that could fit in relatively well at a cheaper price point. And then some of the names that you may hear about as far as a back end starter that we could grab might be like Corey Kluber, who got a lot of noise today because he threw a side and seemed to impress 25 or so teams that were there. And he, after the injuries that he's dealt with, might take a smaller one-year prove-it deal with that high upside of a former Cy Young contender. Other names out there might be like a James Paxton, Jose Quintana, guys like that. So I think they'll add potentially a back-end starter. Although reports have been good on Dylan Cease and Reynaldo Lopez's progress, I don't think that we can necessarily count on those guys. So I'd love to see them add something as far as starting pitching goes.
Well, it seems like the Tommy La Stella, there's a ton of static and noise about that. Tommy, just give us a call. You can tell us it's happening. It seems like it's destined to happen. Whether it makes you excited, White Sox fan, it does seem like that's probably happening. So that's probably an astute pick and observation there, Trevor. You know, Luke, what do you got? Is there any chance that the White Sox, maybe they're not going to get Trevor Bauer, but any chance they're maybe going more like a Tanaka level, again, as sort of a semi way of like going a little bit more all in on this? Or do you think, like Trevor said, that it's a little bit more, I don't know, call it bargain bin, but let's just call it bargain bin, hunting for that number 4 spot?
Yeah, I think the starting pitcher question I think is interesting. I think after I think that next kind of bucket of guys is Odorizzi, Tanaka. You know, that group of guys. I think there's some buzz of Tanaka going back and pitching in Japan with his kind of there's concerns about his elbow and whether that's going to hold up, and just about the finances if he'd get enough money or enough that he wanted to not go back to Japan. I think there's kind of two ways they could go with this. They could really, I think, kind of swing big and go for this group like the Paxton, Quintana, and I actually kind of like Taijuan Walker is kind of an underrated name as well for that slot. But there's this heap of guys, these older guys that may be looking to catch on with a contender. You know, you have Trevor mentioned Kluber, but you also have Cole Hamels, Adam Wainwright, Jay Happ, Jake Arrieta, Rich Hill. All these, 35 plus guys that would, maybe not make a bad fifth starter, maybe cover a couple months until you want to bring Kopech up. Maybe Cease breaks out. Maybe Stever gets some more minor league innings and he's ready to contribute at the big league level. But the name I keep coming back to is Quintana. I'd love to see him back, especially kind of in a lower leverage, back into the rotation role. We'll just have to see what his market's like. But I think the Sox could wait that out a little bit and see if that type of deal kind of comes to him. Maybe a 2-year deal for Quintana wouldn't be so bad. And, I think just to touch on too, like what Trevor said about Stella, I really like Stella as well. Just before this, there were some rumors that the Sox were interested in Stella, and I was like, Tommy Stella, maybe not the flashiest guy. But when you look at his numbers the past 2 years, he's played about a full season, 135 games over the last 2 seasons, 549 plate appearances. He's hit 289, 356 on base, 471 slug, 827 OPS, 353 WOBA, and 125 weighted runs created plus. So he's been a 25% above average hitter the past 2 seasons, 3.2 F4, 8.6 walk rate, 7.3% K rate. So walks more than he strikes out. And the versatility that Trevor spoke of, 33 last year, 33 games at second, 10 games at first, 9 games as a DH, and 6 games at third. So I think that Madrigal, Eaton, La Stella, 7, 8, 9, and then in any combination behind all the big boppers we got before that, I think that'd be really pesky at the bottom of the order. And we saw from La Stella too from this past playoff series that he was a tough out. It seemed like the Sox could not get him out easily if they could at all.
Do you think Rick Hahn at this point, guys, is realizing he's starting to get a little bit of a pile up of prospects that maybe not, the sexiest system in the game, but a pile up of prospects, guys who are not good, especially now adding Yolkis Cespedes, now who's like yet another right field prospect who is the most likely to end up in Chicago, it seems like at this point. Do you think he's working the phones hard to try to maybe fill that 4 slot, or maybe a higher than 4 slot via trade, maybe trying to package deals, maybe something with Cincinnati or Pittsburgh? Or do you think he's tempted at all to prospect horde at this point? Where do you think he's at, given the fact that the team is sort of committing to having that window really wide open now?
I'm not really sure about that. I think that the Sox have an interesting system because it's always been pretty top heavy. It's starting to fill out a little bit with some of their more recent draft picks, with some of those younger guys that they're bringing into the system, and then some of the international prospects obviously as well. So I would be hesitant to part with some of our top guys. I really like Andrew Vaughn and think he's going to be a guy in our lineup for a long time once Jose Abreu retires or starts to fade off, that is going to be a top tier hitter and brings some of that walks more than our typical prospect, that kind of stuff to the lineup. And then I think Michael Kopech's value is relatively low right now compared to where it was. And then some of these guys, I might be willing to part with some of our younger guys, but I just don't know if there's a really good fit right now. I know I've heard Andrew Benintendi's name a little bit as a potential upgrade in the outfield, which I would have loved if they didn't just bring in Adam Eaton. It seems like kind of a waste to bring in Eaton at this point if they do make that move, but I don't think that he would be super expensive. So, I wouldn't be complaining much unless they significantly overpay for him. But as far as the pitching side of things goes, I haven't really heard too much.
Do you think that the fact that Drew Smiley signed such a generous contract with Atlanta, do you think that is going to sort of spoil the market at all, and that guys we think we might be able to get reasonably, say a Quintana, maybe a 215 kind of deal, or maybe a worst case like a 220 deal? Do you think somehow that's spoiled, or do you think the rest of the league is going to say, all right, just because they sneezed over there doesn't mean that it's going to throw everything off? Because the truth is, there's a lot of guys still waiting to find out where they're going to be playing this season. So there is definitely, I would like to think, still a buyer's market. Or do you think the Smiley thing throws things off?
I think Smiley probably looked at it and he didn't want to take any real risk, and I think he was happy with kind of what the Braves were offering him at the time, and felt comfortable taking that. I think as time goes on, and maybe now there's more certainty with kind of the season moving forward with teams and what they were allowed to spend. I know as recent as right around Christmas time, some teams didn't even have their off-season budgets handed down from their ownership group and how much they could spend. But the thing with the Braves is I believe they are a publicly owned or publicly traded company, so they can't hide. They're the one team that can't hide their finances. If they actually say they don't have money, somebody could actually prove that they do have money to spend, which is interesting. That they were one of the first teams that came out and spent early. But no, I think Quintana would be probably in like the 2 for 20, 2 for 22 to 25 range, something along there. But I think that may be worth it. If the Sox are right around 120 million guaranteed for 2021, maybe, I don't think 140 million is too crazy. So if you kind of set aside 10 million for your starting pitcher and maybe 10 million for a DH upgrade, maybe that's the route they go. But for DH in particular, I think if you're not trading Vaughn, I think that's definitely a short-term option. Like I don't think they're giving Marcell Ozuna a multi-year contract, or I don't think Brantley for 2 to 3 years either. I think that's going to be a 1-year deal if they bring somebody in, which I think they will, just to upgrade just for 2021.
See, guys, the White Sox don't have to be forced to be as transparent as Atlanta. We can just always assume they do have the money. It's easier. It's even easier.
Yeah.
You don't have to pour over any sheets. I know you guys like the numbers, but you don't have to do it the White Sox. You say, yeah, they got the money. They're just not spending it. But hey, this is not the podcast to complain about that, because they did just spend a ton of money on closer Liam Hendriks, and that's great. And I do hope it's a harbinger of the of trends that we might see for the rest of the postseason. Although, again, the market doesn't have a lot of the sexy big names to throw a ton more money at, but you certainly want to see them fortify the team and put the best 26 men out there possible, with some great fortifications in ready and waiting in the minors with Andrew Vaughn, and certainly some of the pitchers. Kopech will be in the major leagues at some point, you'd have to assume, and a number of other guys. We can't necessarily expect the kind of jump that we got like with the bullpen, Jimmy Lambert until he got hurt, Cody Hoyer, Matt Foster. You can't expect that every year, and last year was such a strange season. But clearly, this is a system that is indicating that there are guys chomping and getting ready to come up. So while there are plenty of eventual and maybe near future fortifications, hopefully that's not going to have Rick Hahn hesitating to add the way he still needs to, because this team is not quite complete, even though we added a very, very major piece this week. Any other thoughts on the off season in terms of what we may see, or how quickly we might see next move? Do you think the White Sox want to wrap things up, say, this month, or does it benefit them to wait as close to spring training as possible to maybe strike an even better bargain with players?
Yeah, I think they definitely I think they should wait it out a little bit here and just see what happens with some of these markets, especially in the starting pitching front. I mean, there's obviously, I think, a need and a want to add another pitcher. And if you're kind of, playing the trade market, seeing if you can get a deal that you like, don't overpay. And I think just see if a Quintana, Paxton, maybe even Tanaka, see if one of those guys kind of falls in your lap, and then you move forward with a kind of an elite rotation, maybe an elite bullpen and an elite lineup, and you're putting yourself right up there in the favorites for the American League, which they might already be, but now you're talking about competing with the Yankees and Dodgers for one of the best all-around teams in the league. So I think they should kind of sit back and see how other teams play out. I mean, some teams haven't done absolutely a thing, so I think the end of January, February is going to be very busy for a lot of teams, and I think before that starts, I think you kind of just lay in the weeds and see how the market develops for some of these guys.
Yeah, I think that, while the White Sox were tearing down throughout the rebuild, and then now as they've been building up, they've always been relatively quick to make these moves early on in the offseason and very aggressive with that. And so I think that as a fan base, and from a lot of what you're seeing on social media before this move was made, fans were getting impatient, mad that the money wasn't necessarily being spent. But there's still, the market has been progressing very, very slowly, as you all know, but there's still a lot of time, and I don't think they need to rush into anything necessarily. Kind of see what happens, as Luke was mentioning, and see what the best deal is that presents itself, whether that be a trade, whether that be a signing. And, with the way that Jerry has spent or not spent money in the past, they're going to want to try and get the best deal possible. So I don't think they need to feel like they're in any rush to do that.
And okay, you guys are the metrics guys. I know how I feel, but you guys are the metrics guys. Are you uncomfortable or going to complain about a division where we end up taking 2 or 3 steps forward because the other teams all take 2 or 3 steps back? To me, that seems okay. I'll still take the division crown if that's how we win it. But is there any issue with that?
No, absolutely not. I think Cleveland's a really well-ran organization. I don't think you can ever count them out. I think the Twins will still be there. Maybe they haven't made the exciting moves that the Sox have yet, but I know Detroit. I think they got a good thing going there in terms of their development. Some of their young guys, and I think Kansas City as well has got some good young players. So, the Sox obviously know that their time to act is now, and I don't think it'll be too long before you see teams kind of running up their back trying to take top dog in the division. But we can't even crown the Sox yet because they just finished 3rd place and haven't won anything yet. So we can't crown them yet.
Yeah, obviously the big splash with Lindor with the Indians, as well as Carrasco, getting rid of those contracts and shipping those guys off for prospects. You'd think that the Indians would probably take a step back, but it's still so early in the offseason. I wouldn't be shocked if the Twins are more aggressive later and look like a more serious contender once everything wraps up and the season gets underway. And then, like Luke mentioned, that was another thing that I wanted to bring up. Those bottom feeders of the division, while they may not compete for the division this year, they are improving. They're getting better. They have a lot of young talent. So overall, they're not going to be as easy to beat up on as last year, where the White Sox absolutely ran through them. So in that regard, where the Indians might take a little step back and the competition for that division winner might not be as strong, overall, the division could definitely still be just as strong, if not stronger. Both central divisions in 2020 weren't anything to write home about. So it's not like they were going from a world beater division last year. So I definitely think that the division as a whole could be stronger, despite the Indians maybe taking a little step back.
Guys, your generosity is noted. I think you have just made Cleveland's and the Royals and the Twins and the Tigers. You've made their Christmas list. You will get Christmas cards next year. You're being very generous and very kind and very sweet. That's what we have you on here for. All right, listen, this podcast, if not for the 5-alarm fire of the Liam Hendriks signing, up until, practically program airing time, was supposed to be looking into the White Sox system, prospects, our prospect list. We're obviously rolling with our top prospect countdown. We count 100 of them. That's what we do. And the prospect vote that everybody's participating in now, I believe we're at number 12 or 13. So that's going to continue rolling. And hopefully sooner than a month from now, we're going to get on for Dugout Metrics number 3. And we're going to talk more specifically, if not exclusively, prospects with Luke Smailes and Trevor Lyons. But for now, thanks, guys, for hopping on in this emergency Dugout Metrics podcast discussing Liam Hendriks. I think there's a lot of cool insights. And listen, you spread a lot of generosity to the rest of the Central Division, and that's awfully sweet too. So thanks for hopping on and doing that with me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hopefully we get some more moves, and happy to talk some prospects on here next time about some of the future Southsiders.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, it could be pushed. Who knows? It could be pushed opening day if we just keep making great moves. I'm happy to do that as well. But in lieu of any really hot activity, we will probably be on next with edition number 3, talking prospects. But again, everybody continue participating. Please keep voting in our prospect competition that we have and naming our South Side Sox top prospects by poll. And we'll be doing that through number 50. So we're going to do that probably close to the season. Keep on reading. We appreciate you listening. It's been a very busy week, and we've got a lot of listens and a lot of eyes on the stuff we're putting out at South Side Sox. So we appreciate all of you out there reading and listening and even watching. So on behalf of Luke Smailes and Trevor Lyons, thanks for joining us for Dugout Metrics number 2. We will be back with our third podcast, hopefully sooner than later. Thanks, everybody, for listening.